If you are rejoicing because Trump is allowing South African white refugees, which are not refugees, into America, but you're the type of person that says, close our borders, don't let them in because they're black and brown people from war-torn countries, then you are the problem.
This Afrikaner refugee had a 5-bedroom house and a mining company in South Africa. You know, the way refugees have. He had to leave behind his car, his dogs, and even his mother. You know, the way that families that are in terrible danger and have to flee usually leave behind their mother. He's also a bigot, at the very least an anti-Semite and an Islamophobe. A few years ago, he posted vile, sweeping, stereotypical statements about Jews on the internet, and he also posted clapping hand emojis in response to a post about assaulting Muslims. In his defense, he says that he was standing up for his religion, and he was also on very heavy medication at the time, specifically morphine. And I'm sure we all know that when somebody takes morphine, they suddenly become a hateful bigot. This is well documented. And he says that the land expropriation in South Africa has gone too far, your land becomes worthless. I can't wait for him to find out that America has basically the same expropriation laws as South Africa, they just call it something else. And the silliest part of all, you might be amused to know that this man, who walked away from a quality of life, a standard of life, higher than the vast majority of South Africans could ever dream of having, a 5-bedroom house, his surname is Kleinhaus.
On the same day, the U.S. welcomed white South Africans as refugees. Afghans who risked their lives to help our military were told to prepare for deportation. These Afrikaners, descendants of apartheid leaders, were flown in on a U.S. government jet. Trump called them victims of genocide and they waited just 3 months. But here's the reality. White South Africans still own most of the land and are far less likely to live in poverty than black South Africans. Yet, Trump's team said Afrikaners were welcomed because they're easier to assimilate. They'll get housing, phones, furniture, formula, and, according to Trump, citizenship. Meanwhile, Afghan interpreters, engineers, and soldiers, the ones who helped us, are being told it's safe to go home. Safe? The UN says those same allies are being hunted down and killed. So, what does it take to be a refugee in Trump's America? It's about power, race, politics, and who gets to be called a victim.
Accepting these South African farmers is exactly what our country was founded on. Giving white landowners special treatment. We're not just accepting a few white African refugees, we're creating new refugees all over the world. It's easier for white people to assimilate to American culture because they look like me.
The recent decision by the US government under Donald Trump's administration to grant refugee status to 59 white South Africans, mostly Afrikaners, has sparked widespread criticism and raised serious concerns about racial bias and political motivation. This selective move has reignited debates around the white genocide narrative, a conspiracy theory that has been widely discredited by international observers, human rights groups, and South African authorities themselves. The narrative of white farmers being systemically targeted in South Africa has long been used by right-wing politicians and media outlets, particularly in the United States, to steer racial anxieties. While South Africa, like many countries, grapples with high level of violent crime, there is no verified evidence of a state-sanctioned or organized campaign against white citizens. President Cyril Ramaphosa has publicly denounced these claims as false, emphasizing that South African violence affects all communities and is driven largely by socio-economic issues rather than racial motivations. Despite this, the Trump administration has chosen to prioritize the resettlement of white South Africans over thousands of other asylum seekers fleeing from war, natural disasters, or political persecution. In fact, this resettlement comes at a time when Trump's policies have significantly reduced the number of refugees admitted into the US from regions like Latin America, the Middle East, and Africa. Asian immigrants in particular have faced harsh deportation measures and poor treatment, even after enduring natural disasters and political instability. What further complicates the issue is that many of the white South Africans being granted asylum do not fit the typical profile of refugees. Reports indicate that some own large businesses, possesses mining assets, and live in luxurious conditions. This raises questions about the real motivation behind the administration decision. Are these individuals being granted asylum because they are in danger or because they are wealthy and white?
That's why it's so hard for me to get along with my children. My kids make up 3/5 of my family, and unfortunately, they're only going to count as 3/5 of a person soon. These immigrants will assimilate. I mean, they believe in conspiracy theories, they're running away from their problems, and they're trying to pretend that segregation in their country wasn't that bad. They're going to fit right in. If your country voted to take away your private property, please come to America, where we will never do that, because you probably will not be able to afford owning private property. They're running away because the Great Replacement is not a conspiracy theory. You know who'd make a great replacement for me is anyone. And we need more white people because our next civil war is going to be interracial. It's going to pit brother against brother and sister against sister. And from what I can tell, based on the videos I've watched on the internet, brothers and sisters are already getting pretty rowdy.
See, it was never about the immigrants who are criminals over here. It was never about trans people. It was about your blatant racism, your blatant white supremacy. And you are now allowed to be that because your faithful orange turd is in office. So let's be clear. It was never about gas prices are too high, egg prices are too high.
Now, reportedly, 3/4 of privately owned land in South Africa is still in the hands of the white minority, even now, 30 years after apartheid ended. And if you don't know the history of South African apartheid, read a book. Read a book. Google it even. It's not great. You're not in for a good time. So this law that South Africa introduced is supposed to allow South African authorities to take land in public interest without compensation, only in exceptional circumstances. That's what the law states. Like when an area is abandoned. After South Africa said they were going to institute that months ago, Trump posted on Truth Social and said that South Africa is confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. The United States won't stand for it. We will act. Cool. Keep in mind that these certain classes of people he's referring to are white landowners. Elon Musk, who we haven't heard from in quite a while, is South African, if you didn't know. And he has and continues to refer to white people possibly losing land that they took as colonizers as a genocide. So that's fun. A claim that has actually been widely discredited multiple times. If you dig even just a little bit deeper, you will see why this, oh no, poor white colonists get expedited refugee status PR stunt is happening. Even as the Trump administration's anti-migrant status has suspended refugee programs and halted arrivals from places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and pretty much all sub-Saharan African countries. It's simple. South Africa is critical of Trump. And he won't stand for that. You can't have that. He kicked out South Africa's ambassador for criticizing him. He paused USAID funding to South Africa in January. He dismantled USAID and programs funding HIV research and treatment in South Africa. This shit, in fact, is so ludicrous that the Episcopal Church, the one that has got the closest ties and the longest ties with the United States government, has been like, nah, we're not going to be involved in this. No thanks. Meanwhile, people fleeing actual widespread violence and persecution, they're facing a closed door when they try to get refugee status. So, sorry everybody. Looks like money still talks.
This policy shift is also problematic when juxtaposed with how the US has treated Afghan allies who risked their lives to support America's military efforts. Many of these allies are still stranded in limbo, waiting for visa approvals or facing deportation back to unsafe conditions. The question then becomes, why are white South Africans being prioritized over non-white individuals with close ties to the US or more urgent safety concerns? Elon Musk, a South African-born billionaire, has helped fuel the white genocide narrative through social media posts and interviews. His platform has amplified the idea that white South Africans, particularly farmers, are under threat. When powerful figures promote or support misleading narratives, it often violates and emboldens harmful ideologies. The Episcopal Church, which had long been a partner in refugee resettlement efforts with the US government, has publicly denounced this move. In a bold response, they ended their formal relationship with the federal refugee program, calling out the administration for undermining racial justice and equity. Church leaders made it clear that selectively aiding one group while ignoring countless of others goes against the core values of fairness and compassion. While the US has historically been a place of refuge for people fleeing danger, the process of who gets accepted and who doesn't has always reflected broader political ideologies and prejudice. In addition, the decision contradicts the administration's own rhetoric about preventing immigration. For years, Trump and his supporters have emphasized the need to close America's borders to protect jobs and security. Yet this group of white South Africans has been quietly flown in and granted refugee with minimal scrutiny. This hypocrisy highlights how immigration policy is often not about numbers or threats, but about who is perceived as acceptable. The case also raises questions about land redistribution efforts in South Africa, which some farmers claim have made them targets. While land reform remains a continuous issue in the country due to its colonial and apartheid past, there is no credible evidence that such policies are designed to incite racial violence. Most reforms are aimed at addressing long-standing inequalities in land ownership, not persecuting any group. This selective empathy reveals an unsettling truth about how race and power influence who gets to be seen as a victim when white lives are perceived as being in danger. Particularly in a black majority country, it garners global attention, but when non-white individuals suffer systemic violence, displacement or poverty, they are often ignored or even criminalized. Ultimately, this situation reflects a broader pattern of racial and geopolitical bias in Western foreign policy. It's not just about South Africa or the US, it's about how the global system still prioritizes certain narratives and silences others. Whether it's in immigration, media coverage, or international aid, whiteness continues to be a key factor in determining whose life is seen as vulnerable and whose suffering is deemed real. In closing, the decision to resettle white South Africans under the banner of racial persecution is not only misleading, it distorts the reality of South Africa's complex social challenges, misrepresents the nature of global refugee crisis, system that chooses who is worthy of help based on race and class. If we are serious about justice and humanitarianism, then we must hold all refugee claims to the same standards, regardless of who the applicants are or where they come from. Guys, drop a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are about this particular topic. Also remember to subscribe, like, and share as well. And until next time, bye-bye.